Express yourself through art and show the world your heart. Express yourself through art and show the world your heart. You're in the know with Esther and Larry. Art on the air today. Stay in the know with Larry and Esther. Art on the air our way. Express yourself through art and show the world your heart. Express yourself through art and show the world your heart.
Welcome. You're listening to Art on the Air on WVLP 103.1 FM and Lakeshore Public Radio 89.1 FM, our weekly program covering arts and arts events throughout Northwest Indiana and beyond. I'm Larry Breckner of New Perspectives Photography, right alongside here with Esther Golden of The Nest in Michigan City.
Aloha, everyone.
We're your hosts for Art on the Air. Our theme music is by Billy Foster with a vocal by Renee Foster. Our underwriters for Art in the Air are Valparaiso University's Brower Museum, regional art patron Mary Levan, and our landlord Walt Breidinger of Paragon Investments. Thank you for your generous support. Art on the Air is supported by an Indiana Arts Commission Arts Project grant through South Shore Arts and the National Endowment for the Arts. Thanks to Greg Kovach, WVOP's station manager, and Tom Maloney, Vice President of Radio Operations at Lakeshore Public Radio. Art on the Air streams live at WVLP.org and is rebroadcast on Monday at 5 p.m., plus is also heard on Lakeshore Public Radio, 89.1 FM every Sunday at 7 p.m., also streaming live at lakeshorepublicradio.org, and is available on Lakeshore Public Radio's website as a podcast. Our Spotlight interviews are also heard Wednesdays on Lakeshore Public Radio. Information about Art on the Air is available at our website, brech.com/AOTA. That's Brech, BRECH.com/AOTA. That includes a complete show archive, Spotlight interviews, plus our show is available on multiple podcast platforms, including NPR One. Please like us on Facebook, Art on the Air, WVLP, for information about upcoming shows and interviews. If you're interested in being a guest or sending us information about your arts-related event, exhibit, please email us at aota@brech.com. That's aota@brech, BRECH.com, or through our Facebook page. Art on the Air is always looking for financial support. We'd like to thank our current supporters. If you're looking to support Art on the Air, Esther and I especially would invite you to become an underwriter of this program in particular. We have information on our website at brech.com/AOTA. You can find out support information there. So don't just be an Art on the Air listener. Become a supporter or underwriter in whatever amount you're able to do so we continue to bring you great content and this great local programming. And like I say every week, don't give till it hurts. Give till it feels good. And you'll feel so good about supporting Art on the Air. And this week on Art on the Air Spotlight, we have a returning guest, Steve Bensing from the Duneland Photography Club. He's active with photography himself, and we're going to talk about a little bit of what's going on in late October here with Steve. Steve, welcome to Art on the Air Spotlight.
Well, it's good to talk to you, Larry, and it's good to also talk to Esther.
Yeah, nice to see you, Steve.
Yes, very good. Well, the Duneland Photography Club, it's been an interesting year. You know, we made plans and then we had to. And, you know, that's kind of how things have been working for people as we go along. But what we've been doing the last few months is we've been having our meetings outdoors. And then sometimes we'll do part of that as a Zoom meeting. So, for example, our last meeting we went outdoors to Ogden Gardens and took some photos. And then 2 nights later, we had a Zoom meeting where we could do our show and tell and share some photos and things like that. So we were able to capture people. A lot of people want to get out, want to do things, and there's still some people that are pretty cautious, or maybe they're a little bit older. One of our members are, so we have some members that are up in age in our photo club. Let's just say it that way. And so they appreciate being able to get online. So we're planning our upcoming meetings. Actually, we're hoping as we get into the cooler months to maybe do some things indoors that we can social distance, but we'll also continue to do some things on Zoom. So that's kind of what we have planned. We're a little bit more flexible than what I like to be. And what I mean by that is, you know, we like to have things planned out several months ahead. Well, it seems like those things change. And so we just have to learn to be a little flexible. That's one of the things we've learned this time.
So those activities, do you have anything upcoming like late October into November? Any plans for the club outings or things like that?
Well, right now we're planning. What we basically have planned is we're planning on a meeting, which will be a week after what we normally do, which is we're planning to have our next meeting of the Duneland Photography Club in November on the second Tuesday instead of the first Tuesday as usual with the election going on. So that's just an example of us having to be flexible with our activities. And some of the photo shoots that are coming up, we're thinking about doing one in downtown Valpo of some nighttime shots. That's always a fun thing. And so I tell people stay tuned to see what's going on.
So, Steve, how have you been submitting differently during this pandemic? Have you been reaching out further with submissions for your personal photography?
Well, yes, actually, I have entered some exhibits that were totally online. For example, there's one that's up in Wisconsin, Matchwish Waters. It's called the Mailto Art Show, and that one is usually in July. Well, they did it totally online, so that's actually online right now, and it will continue online until the end of the year. I also entered some things for the art bar. They did an online art exhibit this year, so instead of their traditional one, so that is going on now. And there's other things that we've been doing, but still we've been able to do some things in person. Myself and Peggy Carter were featured artists at the SFC Gallery in July in Michigan City. And currently we have some of our work at the Wild Rose Brewing Company in Griffith for the South Lake Artists Co-op. So that show just started.
Excellent.
Excellent, yeah.
Tell us a little bit about what you plan to do after the pandemic is over with.
Well, one of the things is I just want to get out and shoot some more, although I have taken advantage of going on some trips, went on a trip up north earlier this summer into Wisconsin, and then went out west later in the summer. But there's opportunities now maybe to get together more with some of my photography friends and colleagues and do some more things together than we have been able to do.
So if people are interested in the Duneland Photography Club, tell us how they can reach out, where you meet and where you normally meet and how that works.
Okay, we normally meet at Sunset Hill Farm County Park, which is at the intersection of US 6 and Meridian Road, north end of Valparaiso. We also have a Facebook page, Duneland Photo Club, and we have an email address, dunelandphotoclub@gmail.com. So you can get a hold of us various ways. Look for us on Facebook or send us an email.
Okay. Is there any cost to join?
No. Well, the cost to join is the whole $10 a year. So if you come to the first meeting, you can visit. After that, we figure you want to stay with us. It's $10 a year. So we'd love to have you and, skip that one cup of coffee and join the photo.
Well, we appreciate you coming on Art in the Air Spotlight. That's Steve Bensing from the Duneland Photography Club and local photographer. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're listening to Art on the Air, WVLP 103.1 FM, and on Lakeshore Public Radio 89.1 FM. And now a very special musical treat from Billy and Renee Foster, their new song.
You have the right to vote. Vote because others paved the way. Vote. Don't just ignore this freedom and throw this right away. Vote. You're blessed to live in a country. Vote. A place where you can make a choice. Vote. The choice is yours, my friend, and we need to hear your voice. If you want to be heard, voting is the way to do it. Our democracy Get out and vote this election. Vote. It is the most important right. Vote. You have a choice that's before you. Get out and use that right. If you want to be heard, voting is the way to do it. Our democracy, it depends on us. Value it, we must vote. Get out and vote in this election. Vote. It is the most important right. Vote. You have a choice that's before you. Get out and use that right. Get out and use that right. Vote.
And our guest on Art of the Year is Kay. She is an artist, folklorist, whose work is concerned with rural practices and places and encompasses the fields of photography, videography, audio, ethnography. As a 2019-20 Sustainability Fellow with the Center for Sustainable Future at IU South Bend, she is currently conducting an oral history about the roadside spring in Gary, Indiana. Kay Westhues, welcome to Art on the Air.
Thank you, Larry, and thank you, Esther. I'm really glad to be...
Kay.
Yes, thank you. I'm proud to be part of this, so glad to be part of it. So,
my first question always is we want to hear about your personal journey, like how you got from where you were to where you are now, kind of like where you grew up, where you went to school, those types of things.
Okay, well, I grew up not far from here in a small town, Walkerton, on a farm. My dad was a farmer and a big family, 7 kids. And I always wanted to be an artist as far back as I remember. My oldest sister, was a painter, and I used to watch her paint as a kid, and I loved the smell of paint, and it was just like so fascinating. And I had a great high school art teacher who encouraged so many of his students to go into the arts, John Thomas and at John Glenn. And when I discovered I wanted to be a photographer, I was a senior, and he didn't have a dark room, but he said, go in the shop and use a dark room there and just teach yourself. So that's what I did. And I definitely wanted to go to art school, but I didn't go to art school initially because we were raised Catholic, and my dad told all the kids that if we went to Catholic school, he would pay for it. So I did some research, and I found out that this great priest, Father Don Dahl, who was a photojournalist, was teaching at Creighton University, and I applied and got in there into that photography program, and he was amazing. And, I think I got into photography first by seeing an Edward Weston show at the Snipe Museum as a kid, and that just blew me away. I mean, at that time I was really into black and white and the tonality of his prints, and they were platinum prints, and I was just like, I want to do that. I want to make those things. And so, I went to Creighton for 1 year, but I had my heart set on RISD, Rhode Island School of Design, because they had sent a brochure to the high school at the time, and I was like, RISD, that's really where I want to go. So once I got into Creighton, I worked with a fellow student, and we kind of got my portfolio together and applied, and I got in. So I transferred to RISD my second year, and that was a great experience.
So so in high school, that first initial darkroom was probably just black and white anyway, correct?
Yes, it was. Yes.
Yeah. And so were you doing the type of photography you are doing now, which is, I mean, I just have to say, I connect so deeply with you and your work, and I appreciate and admire you so much, Kay. And
that means a lot. Right back at you.
Really do. So were those first initial photographs, were they of people and places, or were they the land, or I guess I want to know, is the focus sort of the same and you've just expanded on it?
Yeah, good question. Because at RISD, I mean, what I photographed a lot was the urban environment that was new to me because I lived downtown Providence, and I remember being very sad seeing trees like in cages, right? And I photographed a lot of that type of thing. But then I moved to a little bit outside of Providence, and what a fellow student had bought this house, and he had students working on the house in exchange for rent. So it was kind of like this really nice collaborative household outside of Providence near the Situate Reservoir, which was this huge, water supply. And it was totally protected by a fence. No one could, boat in it or anything because Rhode Island is so polluted. It's really was a dumping ground. A lot of super fun sites and stuff there. So I did this project where I walked around the edge of the Situate Reservoir and photographed the fence at different places. And I had this wonderful, Wendy Snyder McNeil was my professor at that time, and she really resonated with me and helped me focus on, what I wanted to say as an artist. So that was really the first project that I really felt I owned, and that was mine, Before then, I was just taking pictures that I thought were cool, that, the light was cool or this or that. But, I really hadn't formed what I wanted to say yet.
It does take, just even doing that takes a natural sensitivity. Some people have a natural photographer's eye, and some of it needs to be developed. And it has always seemed that you've just had a natural one, for composition and working with those lights and shadows.
Yeah, I don't know about you, Larry, but I feel like being nearsighted helped with that because I went a long time without glasses. And so I saw things sort of out of focus. And I think that really helped my compositional skills.
Well, it also depends on what you do. I shot so many years with this a 70 to 200 lens on a 35 millimeter, a full frame, both in film, that seems to almost sometimes define what your how you do your photography, which, of course, I'm a Canon shooter, which I always tease people about if you're a Nikon shooter. But anyway, one of the questions, you also moved on, we kind of still want to complete your journey story a little bit. So then you went on to study folk studies at Western Kentucky. Tell us a little bit about that. And you also got a master's there and other things.
Yeah, so I didn't graduate from RISD for a number of reasons. It was a very expensive school, and I did not come from like a family of means. And, we were farming family, a large farming family. So I had to take out quite a bit of loans to go there. And then the second year I was there, the faculty went on strike, which I totally supported. But that meant that, we weren't really having classes, right? And I was paying a lot of money. And so at the time, I thought that I needed to be back to Indiana because that's really where my subject matter I felt resonated with me. At the time, too, I had started photographing my family a lot, portraits of my family in black and white using a Rolleiflex. Rolleiflex was my camera of choice back then. And so I wanted to be back there. So I didn't graduate. I left after 2.5 years and came back to Indiana and worked for a while, a lot of different jobs. I got a really nice dark room in the Colfax Cultural Center here in South Bend, which was at that time, I almost felt like being back in school because there were a lot of different artists who had studios in there and we had a nice, environment for the arts. So, but then I decided I needed to get that degree in order to start getting grants and get funding and, taken more seriously as an artist. So I applied to IU and I got into what's called the Individualized Major Program. This is a long story. I don't know if you want to hear this whole story.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead, please.
But the Individualized Major Program was great because I think they still have it. You can create your own major. You just have to have a faculty sponsor. And Reg Heron, who was a photography professor there at IU at the time, was my sponsor. And I crafted this idea of I wanted to study photography and ethnocentrism and how photography contributed to ethnocentrism from, along a historical timeline. So I set up, my own curricula and path and got that degree. And Reg was a wonderful support during that, period. So I didn't actually go to art. I didn't actually get an art degree. And then after that, I decided I needed something more practical. And I was making for my final project, I shot images of lawn ornaments that depicted African Americans. I had photographed them in a radius of the area where I lived. I had 100 Polaroids of these images that I had shot. And I also shot some with the square Rolleiflex. And so I had all these images and I had mapped them on a map, and that was the exhibition that I initially made. But then when I went through my program, I did a whole different exhibition where I interviewed people who collected them or who sold them, or, who had historical information about them. I had all these quotes interspersed throughout the images, and I had a book for people to write their own information. So anyway, what I was trying to do was, talk about a topic and make people think about that topic through my art. And so I decided I needed to learn more about how to convey information through images or convey, a point of view. So I decided to go into the instructional technology program because this program was offered through IU. I got a master's through it, and it basically covered the design of instruction, any type of instruction. And so I focused at the time on web-based instruction. And my idea was to try to make really effective propaganda. And, it was a great program because it did really give you a good framework on how to teach something.
Sure.
And affected my art. And it also gave me a practical skill of web design, which I've used to support myself since then. So all of that was good.
Yeah, so completely smart. And so that would be the start of where you started doing multimedia, which is, yeah.
Yes.
Yes. And so I can't wait to talk about how you expand on that, but we'll let you continue with the story.
That program was wonderful, but it was very business focused at the time. And I was a union person. At the time, I was a letter carrier. That's how I was making my money down in Bloomington. I was a letter carrier. And I felt that the unions were getting kind of short shrift in the program. And so I asked my professor if I could do something, project around that. So we did a film about the Labor Council for my department, which was really fun. And it changed the minds of a lot of the team members who initially didn't want to work on a film about unions. So, that kind of thing was really made me feel good about, that program and the skills I was learning. But then, I moved back up here, probably, 1999, because both of my parents got ill at the same time. My dad was diagnosed with cancer, and my mom had this chronic condition that was getting worse with age. And all my siblings are married except for me. And I decided, well, why not? I had a lot of friends up here. So I moved back up here, and living that close to my parents, I bought a house in Walkerton and lived 3 blocks from them. I started to really be interested in this life that I saw was my dad's way of life, this farming kind of way of looking at the world that I felt was slipping away. So I got really interested in starting to document the communities around Walkerton and where I live. So I spent some time working on a photo blog. That was kind of when photo blogs were new, before Facebook and all that. You were putting your photos on the, web to share with other people who wanted to look at them. And there was a whole community around it. And it helped me feel connected being, living in Walkerton, which was sort of isolated from the arts. And so it was a fun thing to do, and it turned into this bigger project for me. So I worked on that for about 7 years, and I'm still working on it. I still will go somewhere, certain towns that I just love to go to that have a lot of history in Indiana. Logansport is one of them. Peru is another one. Attica. There's just some towns that they still have that old, they haven't torn down their old buildings. They're usually river towns. They have a really interesting history, and I just like to try to, capture some of that essence of what that town's about. I don't know if that's even the right way to put it, because they're documentary, but they're also about me. They're about what I find interesting about these places, or how it resonates with my childhood, or what have you. So,
well, the images are so comfortable. I mean, I love Walkerton. I get that. I just get that. It feels, it's such a great town. I mean, just, my friend and I would go there for lunch all the time. It just makes you feel like you're in a town, and your images capture that so beautifully, because it's going to be lost as these buildings are torn down or rehab beyond visual comprehension anymore. They just change so dramatically.
Yes, a lot of the places that I photographed are gone. I mean, because I will go back and check, and they're gone. So, yeah, I'm glad that I was able to photograph them. And also the people. I mean, the people I think are interesting. Although, to be honest, I feel lately like going into rural Indiana is not as much fun political wise. I don't feel comfortable there right now. So I've done a lot of less photography, less partly because of COVID as well. But so that project was really fun, and it was really broad. But I felt like I wanted to kind of keep exploring this idea of what rural meant. And I wanted to focus it on something a little narrower, but I wasn't really sure what that would be. And then I kind of fell into this when I was photographing in a small town of Delphi. I was sitting at a cafe, and some of the people around that little horseshoe cafe kind of counter, they said, well, before you leave town, get some of our water before you go. I'm like, what are you talking about? And, they said there's a spring in the next town of Pittsburgh, and I should go. And this was in January, and it was very cold, and there were people getting water from this pipe stuck out of the ground, and it wasn't very pretty. It was in like an empty parking lot, right? So I'm thinking, what is this about? And I Googled it sitting in the car, and found out it was an artesian well. And then I got really interested, and because I did not know that people could get water from the ground in Indiana. I thought it was too polluted by farm runoff and everything. So as I found that, I got really, really interested and kind of obsessed with it. And I got a grant through Indiana Arts Council to document them, and I did kind of road trips around the state. And I got some nice film, video of the springs and sounds of the springs. But what was missing was the stories of the springs. Like, how did they get there? Why are people using them? What's the history of them? How long have they been there? And so that led me to folklore. And I feel like when I got into that program, I was very excited because it was in Kentucky. I applied to Western Kentucky University, which is in Bowling Green, and they have a really well-known folklore department. So I was really happy that I got accepted. And I wanted to go down there to study springs, to learn if there were any, part of what I was interested in is to find out if there were any spiritual aspects to springs that might exist in Kentucky that I didn't really find, from talking to people in Indiana. But I was able to study in more deeply springs in Kentucky, which led me to learn about how people have this really great knowledge base about, geology and the way that minerals affect water. And it was just really interesting.
So were there any spiritual aspects of it that you discovered?
Well, other than baptisms in the river, not so much directly with springs, no. But I have now a little bit from the Gary, I have heard of the Gary spring that water has been used in like church services. So yeah, I think that there is a little bit of still a spiritual aspect that people consider water a spiritual thing.
For our photographer friends, I'd be curious about your transition from film to digital and equipment you're using now, because some of the people might be interested in that before we move on to actually some of your other multimedia projects.
Oh, thanks, Larry. Yeah, I guess because I was already into computers at that time, it wasn't as hard of a move. But the thing that I really don't like about digital is that I have to spend so much time in front of the computer. And I really resent that. I don't like having to spend that much time in front of the computer. But I feel like it's helped me because it's less expensive for me to shoot now. And I can start projects on my own without having to have a budget first, to do the shooting. So that's been a really bonus for me with digital.
Yeah, my old rule of thumb was every click of the shutter is a buck. And so you started being more conservative about your composition and things. Now, when I shoot, I go out and shoot multiple compositions, exposures, and things like that. So you have, it's easy for a single thing to maybe shoot, 25, 30 images that before you might shoot like one or two. So I know you become much more. And of course, unlike you, I love being in front of the computer editing. I spend a lot of time just doing that. And so I just absolutely love digital editing.
I know it kind of balances out. I can't even say how many thousands and thousands of hours I spent in the darkroom processing images as well, and that was in the dark. So.
Yeah, I kind of miss that though, because I used to put the music on, and of course I had my darkroom in that Colfax Center, which there were always people around. Usually there were people around. So yeah, I kind of miss that experience because I don't really do it anymore. I don't have a darkroom in my house. I still have my equipment, but I don't have a darkroom. I have a little room that I can process film in, but I don't have, the whole setup.
Do you still use film?
Yeah, I've used film. I used a 4x5 for a project that I did that was a commission with the Snipe Museum. And so that was the last time I used film. And before I did that project, I shot a lot of black and white with the 4x5 just to get back into practice with it. And I processed it, in the house. So I wish I had a budget for that, because I would still be shooting with that large camera.
Yeah, you get
Great photos, right?
great images. Yeah. Well, real quick, I have the Canon 5DSR, which is a 50 megapixel sensor, even though it's a 35 millimeter camera, and I got it for wildlife photography. And now I can still use my 70 to 200 zoom, and then crop in and still have enough pixels to. Most of the work I exhibit is usually like 20 by 30 on canvas gallery wraps. So. You're listening to Art on the Air, WVLP 103.1 FM, and on Lakeshore Public Radio 89.1 FM. Tell us a little bit about some of your other multimedia projects that you've been working on.
Well, yeah, I have a question about water catchers.
Sure.
So, and which I listen to over and over again for the sounds and for it's just such a great video. It's a great film. Okay. And so in them, you see a lot of the people talking. So were they telling you stories at that point, or did you just capture them talking to each other?
A little of both. Sometimes I always ask people, how they found out about it. And sometimes people wouldn't remember how they found out about it. It would just be something they just started doing when they were kids, I guess. But yeah, I would ask people also if they had any special memories with the spring, or any experiences that they had, unusual experiences at the spring. And but sometimes they'd just be talking to each other, because I think there is a real community that kind of forms around these springs of people that gather that water, especially the ones that are really heavily visited, like the one in Carmel. It's closed. That one in Carmel is closed right now because they're renovating the park, but it has, a really good core of visitors there.
I was looking through some of your work, and we want to make sure we, before we get out of here, do websites and things like that. So tell us a little bit about the ethnocentrism and individual major program in Indiana, and some of those other projects you've been working on. You're currently, like in 2016, you did one called the Portage Path, Returning Art History. Tell us about some of those solo exhibitions that you did and worked on.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. Well, the Portage Path was the commission that I had from the Snipe Museum, and it was to commemorate the 150th anniversary of South Bend. So South Bend had a big anniversary, and initially they asked if I would document the river, because they knew I loved water. And I did that show for Art Post, We Are the River, that Sadie was part of. But I decided I wanted to do something different, because it wasn't going. When I thought of the river, I thought about all the seasons, and I wasn't going to have that much time for it. So I did some history, some research in the local library, and learned about this Portage Path that was there before South Bend. It was actually Chicago had a Portage Path, Fort Wayne had a Portage Path. They were paths that linked the Great Lakes with the Gulf of Mexico, because people could travel down the Great Lakes, then portage their canoes, get into the Kankakee or the Illinois River, and then get into the Mississippi and go down to the Gulf of Mexico. So it was a travel route, basically. And we had about a 5-mile portage path that went between the Kankakee and St. Joe rivers. And it was commemorated with a plaque, because LaSalle landed here, and so, the start of South Bend. So I wanted to kind of trace that path at first, and then I realized, well, it doesn't really exist anymore. It wasn't really, the commemoration is at the mouth of where he landed, but the path itself was not saved in any way. Some of it became a road, but so what I did instead was I took images along the general area that sort of suggested roadways in one way or another, but also just commented on, I guess, why is it, what happened? Why is it gone? Why is it not part of our culture? And for example, there's one image that is of a recycling facility where there's this kind of a mountain made of recycled materials. And so it looks like a landscape, but it's basically kind of a dump, over but anyway, and then I also did the headwaters of the Kankakee, which is now the headwaters of Kankakee is at a ethanol plant. So I did an image of that. Right now, the Kankakee is kind of at risk, because they're considering building a huge economic development area over the watershed right now, which is an issue for South Bend. So yeah, so that was the project, and I did that with a 4x5 camera. It was really fun to work on, and the images. I also made a handmade book. I printed the images out, and I had it bound by a bindery in Chicago, and it was a limited edition that the Snite kept half and I kept half. So I have one left if anybody's interested. But yeah, that was a fun project to work on. Probably one of the best commissions I've had, because I had like total freedom of what I wanted to conceive and do there.
That's magnificent.
I know, it was really a blessing, or whatever you want to call it. It was luck. It was a good thing. Wonderful thing. Wonderful
For exhibits, how do you render some of your things? What do you do them as prints, or what medium do you actually, like if you go to a gallery, how would you have them rendered?
Generally, I will make the prints myself if I can here at home, but I can only make them up to like 18 inches wide. So for that project, I went to Filter Photo in Chicago. They have a lab that you can rent time,
Right,
and make larger prints, and you can also get. Actually, that was a great education for me in digital printing, because I got some really good tips on how to better use Photoshop to more subtly do the things I wanted to do. So my printing improved a lot from that experience. But so I try to print it myself as much as I can, because that's the fun part, getting the final say on how it's going to look. And generally, I just put them under glass. But the project I did with the springs, the spring project, I framed those in a frame that I finished myself, and then my artist friend Jake Webster carved like little niches in the frame, and I put little containers of the spring water in the frame.
Oh,
and
how
so
creative.
Yeah, and those weren't on glass. They were on some type of, I can't remember what, sin board, maybe it was called. I can't remember the name. It was an archival board, and then they had a covering, like a coating on them that made them UV protected. And so I didn't have to put glass on those. And so they looked more like, almost like they could be, drawings, or they could be photographs, they had a different look about, like relics.
So Kay, when Water Catchers went to Dublin, did you also send prints, or was it just the video?
That was just the video. So the video got into that show. Yeah. And that was
we were so excited for you. I remember when that happened.
Yeah, thank you. I was excited too. That was just amazing to be, and then I got to be there, see the show, and the show ended up traveling to a few different places after that. So yeah, that was really, really exciting.
What do you video edit on?
At that time I was using Final Cut, but now I use Premiere.
Okay. Almost have to use that now. It's and if you're using a Windows-based thing, especially. So, and what cameras do you use in hardware? I'm interested in the nuts and bolts, because, like I said, we do have photographers and videographers that listen. So,
yeah, well, I have a Canon 5D. It's only 12 megapixel. It's old, out of date.
I've got two of those.
Yeah, and I have a Sony. It's a small camera, mirrorless camera. I can't remember what version it is. But I don't really care for the lens on that camera, so I mostly use that if I just need to document something.
Right. And
then I have the 4x5 and the 2 1/4. I have two Rolleiflexes actually, and that's pretty much what I use.
Okay.
On my phone. Sometimes I use my phone.
And what do you use for videography?
I have another Canon. It's actually it's a small mini tape. It's an older small tape based camera,
like
and
a
that's what I
Digi-8
used
probably
for most of that. And I had a little boom video mic on it, a Rode mic on it.
Yeah.
Now, it's okay. When did you start including audio with your presentations?
Well, it might have been the time of the springs, because of the sounds of the springs I just wanted to capture. But I was also making films off and on. Like I made a film of some of the things that I would see when I did my small town kind of story. Like I did one film about the chicken bingo that happens every year in Francisville Fall Festival. And I did one about the largest paint ball in the world, which is in Alexandria. Or I actually painted it with the person who started it. We painted it together. So I've done a few little short films, off and on. I just like I had a roommate at RISD that was a film major, and she really inspired me, or got me really interested in film at that time. We watched a lot of films. So yeah, I was always interested in that. But I think it was the springs that really made me start to think about sound and what sound can do to, a person. I mean, the sound itself can it can influence you in so many ways. It can
It's
bring
so
back memories.
evocative.
Yeah. Yes, and also help you process stress, and there's a lot of that going on, now. So, yeah, I think that sounds are really important. So this other project that I've started with help from the IAC, where I've been doing these soundscape workshops as part of the Arts in the Parks project. And my idea was to do soundscapes down the Wabash River and make this piece about the Wabash River. But so far, I've only gotten as far as Peru, and I don't know if I'll go any farther because they've canceled the grants for next year. I don't know how I'm going to get to the next location, but I'd like to go. Oh, hi, Kat. I'd like to go to Logansport next and do some soundscapes there and just keep working my way, down the river. So
I want to, like, with my installations, I like to do video, audio, and also fragrance. And so when I watch water catchers, I really want to smell it too. So it would just be like,
how do you incorporate the fragrance? I always
sometimes
wondered.
with a diffuser, sometimes I'll rub the equipment with like an essential oil. So there's like because then the heat of the video or the monitors helps release the fragrance as well. So
yes, that would work because they get very warm. Yeah,
they do get warm. Yeah, that requires I have to go back and replenish occasionally, but I also like when it gets softer as well. So it's just like, did I smell something as I walked by? It's kind of just...
Kay, I saw one of your projects was in South Bend. It was I think something to do with the theater there, the Civic Theater. It was like Women, Home, and Revolution of Memory. And I think that was in 2019. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, that was curated by another wonderful photographer here in South Bend, Rita Collier. And Rita was organizing exhibitions for the Civic at that time, and she decided to, do this really beautiful photography exhibit where she invited photographers that she knew through her professional contacts, and I was included in the show as well. I think it was a combination of a lot of types of work, but mostly it was all photo based. And so, yeah, that was that. I was included in that show. And so for that exhibit, I was at that time photographing, and I still do. So there's a lot of things that I kind of work on long term. So I'll like photograph around South Bend. I like photographing working class communities, I guess, because I just think there's interesting forms of expression that people have in their yards, the way that they paint their homes. I just like to see creativity expressed, and so I try to document that. So part of what that series that I showed there was from that series, but it wasn't a one-person show. It was a group show with a number of really wonderful artists.
So what are you looking forward to, projects that you're looking forward to doing? Probably, we'll talk about the impact of COVID on you, but what's something you're planning for, either video, photography, or what else?
Well, a few different things. The oral history project that I'm doing in Gary is about a roadside spring that's on Chase Street, and it's still used for water collection. It's still tested and is safe to use. And I've been collecting stories about why it still remained in the public commons. That's one of my, I guess, research questions is how does it remain in the public commons? And it remained in the public commons because the communities that surrounded it didn't have public municipal water or good wells for a good 3 decades. And so they had to rely on that spring for their drinking water. This was during the 50s, 60s, and 70s. So telling the story about that spring, it also, it kind of blossomed or like an onion, like layers upon layers. And I learned a lot about, the real effects of environmental racism and environmental racism in that community. It wasn't just a race base because it's also a very poor white area called Black Oak there's 2 communities that kind of live side by side there. But just how people who without resources often pay the price of pollution, Right. And there was a Superfund site that also nearby that polluted a lot of the wells in that area. So that project now, I've collected all of the oral histories that I could before COVID, and I don't know if I'm going to be doing too many more. But what I'd like to do next is turn those into a podcast. So if anyone out there is interested in working with me on that, I have wonderful stories about that spring that I would like to share more broadly. And so that's one thing that I'm working on. I'm at the point where I'm trying to figure out what the best way to get those made into podcast. And then I'd like to start working on another spring, like doing another oral history project, maybe about the spring in Carmel, because that one is so well known and well used. But yeah, I'd like to start working another spring. And then I had this other idea, which is still kind of floating around in my head, and I haven't really formed it all yet. But it's kind of a response to what's been going on. Oh, I mentioned earlier how when I drive into rural areas now, I don't feel as welcome or as comfortable. And so the project that I'm thinking or forming in my mind is kind of like my response to that. And so I really don't want to talk about too much more because it's still kind of in the formation stage, but that's the project I'm thinking of working on next.
You're listening to Art on the Air, WVLP 103.1 FM, and on Lakeshore Public Radio 89.1 FM.
So do you still get messages from people telling you, well, there's an artesian well in our area? I mean, has it inspired that?
Yes, I do, because I have a website called wellstories.com where I put photos and sometimes video of the springs that I find, and there's a comment, area for people to comment. So I will get, oh, there's this spring over here, or did you find this spring, or is this spring still open? After the Carmel one closed, sometimes it has closed off and on for various reasons. I would get, asked, is there another spring nearby that get water from? So yeah.
Oh, an interactive map now, I guess, of all the artesian wells.
Yeah, there is a map. I do have a map on that site. Yeah, it's not really that interactive, but it's just like you click and you go to the county page. Some of the springs aren't public, so-called public. And so I don't want to really tell people where they are exactly. So I just kind of take them to that county page, and then the springs are all listed for that county.
Now, how we maybe touch on this a little bit, but how has COVID impacted you? It pretty much has caused most of us to shelter in place, or some of us forced to do it. But how's it, first of all, impacted you personally, and then, of course, you getting out to do your work?
Right. So that was the one thing that, I love going out and taking the road trips, especially any time of the year, but when spring starts, and that happened right at spring. So I couldn't really do that. I didn't feel comfortable leaving South Bend. South Bend, it still has a pretty high rate of cases right now, and I didn't want to go put anybody at jeopardy or anything. So I didn't make any of those trips. And what I did end up doing, though, is that the farm where I grew up, it's basically been abandoned because it was sold to a peat moss company that went out of business, and now it's owned by a bank in New York. So I don't know I didn't know who to ask, but I called the town of Walkerton, and I got permission from someone there to walk on it. And I was taking walks out there and making drawings and photographs and some sound recordings as well. And I was doing that because I felt like I was away from people, and I wasn't, jeopardizing anyone by being close to people in that small community. But what ended up happening is this group of teenagers started to run me off, and they, they used it for hunting. They went out there with their guns, and the last time I went out there, they blocked me in, so I couldn't leave. And so I just decided, this is not going to work. I'm not going to go back to the farm anymore. So, but I did start drawing during that whole time, and I always liked drawing, and I always had art supplies that I never used because I would find, they'd be on sale. I'd buy something, whatever. So I just decided to start drawing again. And I didn't really have any agenda in mind. I kind of used it like I use my yoga. I used it as a way to kind of center myself and process stress. And I like doing contour drawings, and that's still kind of what I'm doing. I do a contour drawing, and then I color it in. It's very simple type of drawing, but I'm having fun with it. And I'm mostly focusing on flowers right now. But
it's so sweet. I love them.
Oh, thanks. I don't know. It's just been fun to do. And I don't know if I'll ever take it anywhere else, but I like the time when I can sit down and draw. I kind of look forward to it now. So that happened because of COVID.
What are you looking forward to doing now after? And I know it might be not till next spring or summer, but breaking out after the pandemic is, well, we'll say, under control.
Oh, so you're asking what her first place to visit is in her mind.
Oh, wow. Well, there's two places I really want to go right now. I have a sister-in-law in Finland. My brother lived there for a while, and I'd love to go visit her again. And I would love to go to Cuba. I've been to Cuba a number of times with art. We have a sister city, Bloomington and Santa Clara, Cuba, which I was involved in that sister city relationship when I lived in Bloomington. So they still make trips, regular trips, and have that sister city is still going. So I'd love to go back to Cuba with one of the sister city delegations, or to go back to Cuba for the biennial. That would be amazing, the art biennial. Esther, if you want to go with me. Hey.
No, yeah. I mean, I love the music and the art so much.
The biennial is amazing. It really is. It's just, they take over the whole city of Havana. It's in lots of different places. And so I would like to go back for that. Definitely.
Boy, that sounds so wonderful.
Well, before we wrap it up here, why don't we get your websites out there and how to contact you and everything like that? So let our audience know how they could reach you and how they can view your things online.
Okay, thank you. Kwesthues.com is my website, and that's KAYWESTHUES.com, and that's where all my photo projects are. And I think I might have one sound map posted there. And then I have also an Instagram account, which is just Westhues, and I post sometimes my newer images there. And then I'm doing something called the Big Draw at the Snipe Museum. They're having the big draw. I'm looking at my calendar right now just to make sure I get the right date.
The 22nd or something.
I think you're right. It's it's a Thursday, the 22nd at 7, from 7 to 8. And it's, part of this.
6 p.m. Central Time.
Yeah, 6 p.m. Central Time. Yes. It's a free thing. And it's just like a little drawing workshop activity. And I think it should be fun. They've already had one of them, and they're also doing, what is that? Where each person takes and continues a drawing. What is that called? Is it the Elegant Corpse? Corpse or something.
The Elegant Corpse. Yeah, I do that with the kids all the time.
Yeah, they're doing a few of those too with Zoom. So, I mean, it's like a whole month of drawing events.
So your interviews could almost continue with Zoom though, right? With some of these well stories?
Yes, they could. Yeah, they could. Some of the folks that I'm interviewing are older, and Zoom is like a learning kind of thing, curve. I think
but they could just do a telephone. You could.
Yeah. I as a folklorist, we were always taught, do not, phone interviews, not so good. You really need to see people.
You want to see somebody. Yeah.
But that has shifted. And
it's almost like the stories are more important now than ever.
You're right. And there's still some people that I would love to talk to, and Gary, that I haven't had the chance to talk to because I had to shut everything down a little early. I would love to have a program too, like an actual program where I bring everybody together. And that's maybe something that could still happen, but I don't feel comfortable doing it right now. But I am going to get a chance to talk about the project at the Calumet Heritage Partnerships Conference, which is in October, and that's also a free conference. And I'm going to be giving a talk about the spring and some of the stories and the history that I learned about the spring. And that is, I think, October 20th. Yeah, at 6:30, 5:30 Central Time.
And where's that at?
You could go to the Calumet Heritage Partnerships homepage. They are they were the sponsor of my oral history project. So I worked with them, and with Indiana Humanities funded it. So yeah, we worked together. So I'll be presenting on that project as part of their conference. They have a lot of good things that they're going to be, it's a multi-day conference. So there'll be a lot of interesting stuff. Check into that conference and see if it interests you.
Any final thoughts for us before we wrap up?
Oh, no, there's just so much interesting, art and expression in this area. And I'm really happy that I was able to be part of this. So thank you guys a lot. It was fun talking with you.
Well, we'd like to thank you. That's Kay Westhues. She's an artist, folklorist, who's concerned about rural practices and places, has many pieces of art. Her website, again, is kwesthues.com. She also has wellstories.com, and you can find her on Facebook with just the letter K, Westhues, and you can find out there, and you can also get contact information. Kay, thank you so much for being on Art in the Air. We really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you guys so much. It was a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to hearing some of your other interviews coming down the line. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And now a very special musical treat during the pandemic from Billy and Renee Foster, their new song called Virus.
Corona life you say could be yours or one of your family. Put on your mask, pull on your gloves, don't take a chance and spread this virus. Essential workers, this really shows that they are our real heroes. Stay at home if you can. Corona is on the scene.
You've been listening to Art in the Air, and we'd like to thank our guests this week. Art in the Air is heard every Friday at 11 a.m. and rebroadcast Monday at 5 p.m. on WVLP and Sunday at 7 p.m. on Lakeshore Public Radio 89.1 FM. Thanks again to Greg Kovach, WVLP Station Manager, and Tom Maloney, Vice President of Radio Operations for Lakeshore Public Radio. Underwriters for Art in the Air are Valparaiso University's Brower Museum, our landlord, Walt Breidinger of Paragon Investments, and Marilyn Van, Arts Patron. Art in the Air is supported by an Indiana Arts Commission Arts Project Grant and the National Endowment for the Arts. If you're interested in being a guest or sending us information about your arts-related event or exhibit, please email us at aota@brec.com. That's aota@brec.com, or contact us through our Facebook page. Your hosts were Larry Breckner and Esther Golden, and we invite you back next week for another episode of Art on the Air.
Aloha, everyone. Have a splendid week.
Express yourself through art and show the world your heart. Express yourself through art and show the world your heart. You're in the know with Esther and Larry. Art on the air today. Stay in the know with Larry and Esther. Art on the air our way. Express yourself through art and show the world your heart. Express yourself through art and show the world your heart.